Hello everybody, Pinstripe here. Welcome to Grassy Outpost. We have yet another scrim here between myself and Mr. Bog Rodan, as I am once again fitting myself with the green uniform of the Tommy's Trotters, bringing the stronger lineup. And actually, this was the first time I was playing Grassy Outpost competitively in a scrim, so it's a first-time achievement for me to get through this game, bringing the stronger lineup, and that is basically what I'm going to be discussing in this video, is maintaining control of a round that, going into it, you know that you have the advantage of the stronger lineup. You'll also notice I went first as well, with my Gren going initially with that first turn, and rather than utilizing the power of the clusters or the high explosives, I take the usual ultra-defensive procedures and jump into the pillbox. Because you know me, when it comes to armament, I'm going to be using that armor as much as I can, and the pillbox is pretty perfect on this map because you do have a decent sightline. And of course I went maybe a little bit nuts with the building of the crazy building layers. I don't know, I really like the layering of this map. You got a perfect shot of it there where you have the split between low, middle and high ground, and all of that is split between slippery tiles. So it's a big change, this map, for a lot of players when you compare it to Grassy Knolls. But Grassy Outpost really requires you to know the routes you need to take and to ensure that you understand where the slippery tiles are and how not to get locked in place. Especially on the low ground, initially it's been kind of slow moving for newer players to understand that you can't just run from one side to the other. You have to have an eye in for the route that you need to take. And once you have that locked in, once you know where you can go, I mean, you'll see Revan demonstrating or trying to demonstrate areas where skips are possible, because throughout this video, he does achieve many of them in his usual cool fashion. But you know me, I'm a lot more linear and straightforward when it comes to my directions. I tend to avoid those skips for the sake of losing time. And when you only have those 30 seconds, it is vital that you get from A to B, you do what you need to do, and in my case, steal the health as much as possible, because I took the health with my Grenadier, and then my second turn, even though I was hit by that shot from the pillbox, my initial reaction was, I don't care, I'm going to go and steal your health, which is kind of protected away inside the buildings. You do have crates up there as well, but as you can see from the mini-map, there are plenty of other crates available too, with a wide variety of weapons on offer. Now, initially I was going to stay up there on the high ground with my scout, get a good sniping spot maybe, but I come back down because I realize that there is actually quite an easy double poison over here, which for a first turn start is maybe not the best, but do bear in mind that these spawns are varied, so they're not always in the same place. And when it comes to trying to balance like fairness, you also have to take into account the turn order. So obviously I was bringing my scout pretty early on, so it benefited that Revan hasn't moved those pigs yet, seeing as they are later on in his turn order. In fact, the gunner that was poisoned last from that double hit there isn't going until 5th in the turn order. He's going last. So he's got a long way to go until he can actually move. So taking advantage of that and not remaining up there on the high ground. There's a lot of different variables of things that can happen during a matchup. Like, for instance, my pillbox being instantly destroyed by the shrapnel, because that is what the engineer is used for. Of course, Revan is bringing the double sappers, whereas I went with mobility in the paratroopers. And in the long run, for me, that's going to pay off. I mean, it's debatable as to whether or not my lineup is technically the stronger. I mean, it's obvious with my Grenadier that makes it stronger, just based purely on firepower. But if we're looking at the matchup between Paratrooper and Sapper, I would honestly say that, yeah, the Sapper is definitely the more powerful, but the Paratrooper is a bit more nimble, obviously, because of mobility. But yeah, if I had to choose, I would honestly choose the Para a lot of the time over the Sapper, just because of, yeah, okay, you have the massive damage output and you can destroy buildings, and it's very situational of when you'll need them, but 90% of the time I know in my heart of hearts that I am always going to need a jetpack, I'm always going to need mobility, and I'm always going to need a bazooka, you know? So that's just my personal preference when it comes to that matchup. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. But the other thing I wanted to mention regarding this map that I really like is how much it can change your mindset, or at least your initial play style, depending on the classes that are being brought in. Because of the restrictions that you have on mobility, i.e. that you have to usually go the long way round to make it from A to B, you can't just cut across. Getting from A to B and trying to find that primary target is not always a piece of cake, and that is where things get a little bit juicy strategically, because it's not like the thing that we're used to in competitive Hogs, right? A lot of pro players, I should say, are used to, if they're bringing the medic, making it to their target within that first turn, and if that doesn't happen and they're put on the back foot, it can feel horrible, and suddenly everyone's complaining that, oh, this map sucks because the slippery tiles are everywhere, and it's like, well, but you can see them. That's my main gripe I have with players that moan about slippery tiles, is that when you can physically see what the texture is, okay, yeah, maybe there are some that are like split 50-50 that look a little bit grassy and a little bit rocky, so sometimes that gives the hint that they can be walked up, but you see rock, it equals slippery 90% of the time. We're not going to talk about Temple of Doom, by the way. No, we're not going there. Shut up. No, but my point is, this map is the perfect example of having to think about every single turn and not being able to switch off that navigation part of your brain where you can easily just run across the entirety of the map. That is the part of competitive Hogs that has been the weakest when it has come to the maps that we've had in the past. Any map where you're easily able to navigate within those 30 seconds from one side to the other, I see that as not being entirely negative, because there are maps where that is meant to happen. You're meant to be able to go from one side to the other within that turn time. But I find the maps that don't allow that all the time to be way more interesting, both playing and watching as a commentator. Now, that's not to say that Grassy Outpost is perfect by any means, because I can understand both sides of the spectrum of getting used to a new map. These are just a lot of new maps that we have been doing in these scrims and just in general in ISO 3 that are new to the map pool. And of course, when it comes to navigation, you want to ensure that every step you take is easy to understand. It's easy to observe at a glimpse, right? You need to know where you're going and to make sure that the tile that you're standing on isn't going to fuck you over in the late game, you know? And when it comes to movement, it can be very, very frustrating. Case in point, when you're trying to go around from, say, like low to mid ground, when you're trying to run around the outside of some rock, right? But you keep hitting a slippery tile, you have to back it up and then kind of turn in even wider. It can become very frustrating. I get it. I really do. But you see rock, you avoid it, you go around it. And you can't take the same mindset as you normally would do if you're playing the default mission 2, because this isn't the default mission 2. You aren't going to find exactly the same skips, the exact same wall skips, I should specify, on this map compared to routine patrol. It's just not going to happen because it's an earlier version. The tiles are going to be different. So do keep that in mind if you are looking for the same kind of wall skips that you would normally find on these kinds of missions. Now, seeing as we're on the subject, Revan is going to give us a perfect example of taking the time to learn a map, learn the skips that are possible, as he goes from low to mid ground with maybe a slight struggle, but he makes it up and attempts to go from mid to high ground using what would normally be the wall skip there, which I don't know if it exists. I'm sure he can confirm in the comments, but then he spins around and then hits me with the disgusting 50. Like, okay, cheers. I mean, really, deep down, I don't need to be telling you all of this. As my mum used to say to me, you are old enough and ugly enough now to do your own thing, and as it is with the community, you guys are amazing at breaking down these maps, finding the best routes, finding the best skips, and effectively doing your own thing, and I love to see it. I love to see people break my maps. As much as it pains me to have to try and fix certain areas, it's an achievement in itself to see maps placed in the hands of certain people and have them being broken in a multitude of different ways. But when it comes to, we're kind of filtering back to the idea of fairness and balancing, I think that a lot of the time the community tends to get quite a bit of tunnel vision on specific issues, whether they be relating to spawns, whether they be relating to the distance of certain spawns, the damage that can be dealt by certain classes or vehicles. There are certain things in Hogs, in my mind, that don't need balancing, that don't need quote-unquote fixing, right? So when it comes to, say, artilleries, as we have discussed previously on Over the Top, for instance, there are spawns there combined with the artilleries where big damage can be dealt, but when you factor in that idea of, okay, I can deal X amount of damage on this turn onto my opponent, the question then remains, well, can your opponent do exactly the same thing to you using exactly the same methods? And if the answer is yes, there is no need for any kind of balance there. I think the main part that a lot of players get bogged down in is trying to balance this game for every kind of situation, i.e. the strengths of the lineups that are being brought by either player. And that's not really possible when you factor in every variable under the sun. So the map that's being played, the round number, the turn order, and just everything else that is encompassed within those things. Those are things that, in my mind, we can't do anything about, because when you try and micromanage things to that extent, it's no longer fun. In my mind, once the maps are chosen for either the exhibition match or the league match that's being played, it's then up to the player to determine what pigs they're bringing, and it's purely on them to bring the right lineup in that situation. If they're bringing a weaker lineup on round 3 or 4, if it's a best of 5, or round 2 in the middle of a best of 3, that's on them. You know, it's on you as the player to decide what is the best lineup within a best of 3 and best of 5, and the understanding that comes with that takes time. You know, we're moving into the 5th season now. I don't know when this video is going to come out, so we might be in the middle of season 5 right now, but either way, it's down to you to make those decisions, and when it doesn't go your way, when you bring the weaker lineup and it doesn't pay off, or you try a strategy that doesn't pay off, I'm afraid that's on you. And it's easy to blame the game, to blame the map, to blame the spawns. Yeah, okay, spawn issues in particular are very obvious when they occur. Case in point in this map, I had that easy double poison, and that could be easily resolved by just moving the spawn away. That is possible. But when you try and micromanage all of those things in very specific circumstances, a case in point again, I wouldn't have been able to get that double poison if I wasn't going first, if I didn't have my scout in the lineup, or if he was later on in the lineup. You know, Revan could have moved his pigs away. There are so many things involved where the outcome could have been so different, but we deem certain actions on certain turns to be unfair because somebody was able to do this one thing in this one particular turn. If it is 100% replayable, i.e. if you're able to do it consistently all the time, every single time, that is when I then take into consideration that a fix is needed. But when it comes to things like shrapnels, when it comes to things like artillery shots or bazooka shots, basically anything involving power weapons, those are the things where you're not always going to get the same outcome 100% of the time. The one thing I would implore everyone within the community to do if they come across an instance where you're playing against an opponent and something occurs to you that doesn't feel fair or balanced, or, you know, because you're coming up against a stronger opponent or a stronger lineup, take into consideration whether or not that turn that just occurred to you onto your own pig is based on skill or if it's based on a bug or an exploit. Because if it's the latter, then we can maybe do something about it. But if it's purely based on skill, then we as a league, we can't scrutinize and we can't penalize skilled players. The skill level at this pro level has grown immensely over the last few years, and with the introduction of new maps and new things to learn, it has grown so much that it can be very overwhelming to keep up with. I mean, we've all kind of had it at one stage or another when it comes to certain seasons of the league. Players have dropped out, taken time for themselves, because it's all just too much all at once, and I would agree with that. I mean, the one season that I didn't play in where my PC broke, I consider that a blessing, because that was only season 2, but it gave me just enough of a breather to take a step back, to focus more on the commentary side, and then to dive back in when season 3 came around. Of course, by that stage, a lot of things have changed, a lot of new maps were introduced, and yeah, it's very overwhelming. And also, as someone who has failed many times when it has mattered the most, i.e. in the playoffs, in the stages of the league where I could have progressed and I failed miserably, either due to a fault of my own or my opponent was just way better than I was, I took that on the chin, I learned from it, and I moved forward, because that's the best attitude that you can have in this game. If you let it get to you, if you let the anger get to you in those instances, and it will happen, it's bound to happen, even at the highest levels, pro players will get incredibly frustrated with this game because it will feel very one-sided. But that's just the way that these turn-based games go. You know, the flip and flop between having an advantage, suddenly being at a disadvantage on the back foot, and the momentum shift between one player to the next is immense. Okay, rant-wise, I think I'm good. I think I got everything out that needed to be said. And going forward, you know, we have just such an exciting period of time ahead of us with the new players that are coming up from Middle League, just the overall skill level. As someone that has been at this top level for quite some time now, I'm just excited to see how things go, both for the maps that we play on and for the players that are coming up that could make it for the big time. Of course, I'm going to try my absolute hardest to make it as far as I can in Season 5, but I'm not holding my breath, and that's just kind of my attitude going into the season. You know, I'll always give my all. I'll always miss my rifle shots when I need to hit my target, you know, because, haha, funny lol, Grenadier can't shoot. He's Albert. Albert confirmed it's the Grenadier. Spooky. Either way, yeah, I'm going to kind of wrap up that rant because it's been a long time coming. I have been holding back. I've been letting people kind of do their thing, but I've needed to say that for quite a while, and I hope that you can understand and kind of take that as not wholehearted like criticism of everybody, but just the amount of voices that we have in the community now is awesome. But from the standpoint of the person that is making these changes, that is physically doing the work, just please bear in mind the parts that actually need balancing and the parts that are gameplay related, the parts that are caused by gameplay, that are not bugs, that are intentional methods of play. All in all, I know that everybody wants the best for competitive Hogs. They want the best for this kind of Hogs of War, and I am all for everyone pitching in, doing their bit to highlight the areas that are problems, to highlight the issues that we have going forward. And I don't want anyone to feel deterred by me ranting about these kinds of things. You know, this is purely just me getting things off my chest that have been there for maybe a little bit too long. With everything that has been going on in my life, both personally and with the work that I do, with my focus primarily being on Lardcore and the pressures that come with that, you can kind of understand how when my big picture thinking is looking at Lardcore, and then every time I glance over at the league and see that there are a multitude of problems, it's then that I have to be sort of a bit more scrutinous in kind of filtering through the list of issues and determining what actually needs changing and what actually will impact gameplay enough that a change needs to occur, whether that be relating to a map or a spawn or what have you. So please do keep those things coming in, but just bear these things in mind that I am saying in relation to the production side of things. You know, the amount of time that I have to put these kind of things together. But overall, I do have to thank the entirety of the Hogs community, because I'm both yelling at you, but thanking you at the same time, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you. We wouldn't have gotten this far, made it this far with the league, with this game mode that we've created for ourselves and the rule set that we use. But overall, that is going to wrap it up for this video. That's enough ranting for one day as I get the final kill on Revan's pig. We kind of skipped over a lot of the gameplay, but towards the end it got a bit derpy. But let me know your thoughts on everything in the comments below. Love you guys, and I'll catch you all later for the next one.